Okay, so now, brothers, we're going to end this video by revisiting the same theme of the cosmic fire versus the cosmic ice, which played out in a relatively famous commercial that was debuted during the Super Bowl, featuring Mr. Morgan Freeman as well as Mr. Peter Dinklage, who are both renowned actors. Morgan Freeman is on record as stating that he does not believe in God. He believes that God was invented, so therefore he believes that he is God. And I give Morgan Freeman a lot of credit for acknowledging that, because the vast majority of the people in Hollywood, in the entertainment industry, in the sports world, and a lot of people in this society in general think the same way, but they're scared to say it. So I give him credit for acknowledging that he is a Saturnian, because that's one of the core principles of Saturnianism, that you are your own God once you allow yourself to be subjected to the quote-unquote great teachings of the demiurge Saturnus, or the quote-unquote black sun. Most of the celebrities who claim to be atheists are actually Luciferians. They just don't want to say it. So let's check out this commercial right here featuring Mr. Morgan Freeman and Mr. Peter Dinklage with some assistance from Busta Rhymes as well as Missy Elliott. They're going to play the role of the spirit guide who is being conjured through mirror summoning or divining by both Morgan Freeman and Peter Dinklage to show you what? They're both witches. They're witches. And the process of mirror divining, which is also known as scrying, spell S as in Sam, C as in Charlie, R as in red, Y as in yellow, I as in India, N as in Nancy, G as in George. That process is utilized to bring forth spirits from another dimension who present themselves to you through a mirror. Disney movies have been depicting this phenomenon for many years. That's where you get the slogan of mirror, mirror on the wall. We also saw that in the video that I did on Miss Issa Rae, where she showed herself to be a witch. And the person that she speaks to, the mirror Issa, is actually a demon that she conjures to guide her. It's a spirit guide. It's also known as catoptromancy. Scrying or divining through a mirror is known as catoptromancy. But once again, just getting back to the video, we're going to see that Morgan Freeman is going to try to rhyme into a mirror. He needs help. So all of a sudden, who appears to assist him but Missy Elliott, who's a very high-level Luciferian and a witch herself, and a venerator of the Mother Goddess principle. Peter Dinklage, he needs help with his raps, so he's able to summon Busta Rhymes. Peter Dinklage represents fire. Morgan Freeman represents ice. They come together. So now let's see how this commercial goes.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a wood...
Do you notice how they're in an all-black room, completely dark? And out of the darkness, out of the shadows, emerges Busta Rhymes and Missy Elliott. It's because they're supposed to signify spirits or guides who are going to assist them in becoming more proficient at hip-hop or rhyming per se. And many of these top rappers, they utilize the same functionality to get inspiration for their songs to assist them with their lyrics. What Jay-Z calls the Rain Man.
Faster!
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Speed it up, speed it up, speed it up, speed it up, speed it up.
Peter Piper picked them peppers.
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck, 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 chuck? Get it together.
Peter Piper picked a peck of
pickled peppers. Chuck, 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 chuck. Come on, man.
A little bit louder. I need conviction. I need to feel it. I need to be like,
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, where's the peck of pickled peppers Peter Piper picked?
How much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
You ready? Yeah.
Also, let's pay attention to the fact that both Busta Rhymes and Missy Elliott emerge from the shadows dressed in all black. They do not represent actual flesh and blood people. They're spirits. But just the fact that they're in all black shows you what? They represent the energy of Saturnianism, of witchcraft, the duality of the cosmic ice versus the cosmic fire, and how they're in great conflict, but they're actually just two sides of the same coin. As Rihanna has already told us, she's a teacher of this knowledge, from the mountaintop all the way down to the boys and girls. So are Busta Rhymes and Missy Elliott. They're all part of the same craft. So now that I've jumped ahead, as we can see here, Peter Dinklage is ready to do battle. He's holding the Doritos blaze as he stands in front of the fireplace, dressed in all black. Once again, brothers, you know, it can be a bit traumatizing for people who are not quite acquainted with these concepts and what the society is actually about. That's why so many people are in denial, because they understand the consequences of accepting what the core energies and tenets are that are being forced upon the people. That being that the so-called elite, or their heroes, quote unquote, the members of the entertainment industry, which includes the politicians, are witches, and that they have declared war on quote-unquote regular people unbeknownst to them. So then if you accept this information, what do you do from then? So I get it. I understand it. That's why I tell brothers to put the Most High first. As we can see here, Peter Dinklage is depicted as the quote-unquote god of fire, Vulcan, or Hephaestus, or Tammuz even, whose name literally means purified by fire, or Heru, or what have you, the quote-unquote sun god. The use of fire is meant to be a signifier of the quote-unquote sun god, so on and so forth. Now here's Busta Rhymes, his spirit guide, who has infested his body. Busta Rhymes, once again, is a demon who was allowed to enter into the overall physical frame of Peter Dinklage's character so that he can speak through him. It represents the concept of what Jay-Z calls Rain Man, or Ra inside of man, that demonic spirit who helps guide the quote-unquote entertainment industry by taking possession of the top artists and speaking through them, just using them as a vessel. Now here at the very end of Busta Rhymes speaking through Peter Dinklage's character, we see the advert for quote-unquote Doritos Blaze, which represents the cosmic fire aspect of that dichotomy between fire and ice, or Saturnian principles. Now we're going to see the polar opposite of the Peter Dinklage cosmic fire dynamic with the Morgan Freeman cosmic ice dynamic. They're two sides of the same coin. As we can see, Peter Dinklage is what they call a quote-unquote little person. He's a Caucasian, and he represents the cosmic fire. Morgan Freeman is the complete opposite. He's an extremely tall, older so-called black man who represents cosmic ice, or the Saturnian aspect. Peter Dinklage represents the quote-unquote solar logos. Morgan Freeman represents the Saturnian aspect. That's why I tell you, brothers, when you watch the Superman film, Krypton represents Saturn. That's why it's shown as an ice planet. When Superman, who is meant to encapsulate the combination of the solar aspect and the Saturnian aspect, when he needs somewhere to live, where does he go? To the North Pole. What does his costume look like? The coming together of the red and the blue, with the divine yellow showing him as the enlightener and his emblem on his chest. You understand that? He is Heru, but he has a Saturnian lineage. That is why in the sequel, Superman Part 2, he squares off against General Zod, who's dressed in what? The all black. You understand? So now let's just investigate Morgan Freeman and the cosmic ice dynamic. So we've already seen how they performed a close-up on the quote-unquote Doritos fire, or the Doritos flame chips that Peter Dinklage was holding. Now we're going to see Mountain Dew ice, fire and ice. As we see here in this still shot, Morgan Freeman is able to pass by this glass of lemons and limes and utilize spiritual powers, or quote-unquote superpowers, to freeze the lemons and the limes. The character of the Iceman in the X-Men is meant to be an allusion to Saturn. When you look at all of the initial characters, whether it be Cyclops or Marvel Girl, quote-unquote Jean Grey, who was Isis or Aset, the Beast Man, Hank McCoy, the Angel, i.e. the quote-unquote fallen angel, who is who? Meant to represent quote-unquote Lucifer, so on and so forth. Or the Iceman, I believe his name is Bobby Drake, that is Saturnian, fire and ice. All of the characters in the comic book world who are of prominence, Stan Lee or whoever the creators were, had an in-depth understanding of the quote-unquote occult or esoteric or pagan mythological background of quote-unquote superheroes. Now we see Missy Elliott, in the same way that Busta Rhymes act as the inspiration for the rhymes or the lyrics of Peter Dinklage. Missy Elliott is acting as the inspiration for the rhymes or the lyrics of Morgan Freeman. And she's depicted as a quote-unquote ice queen, or an ice goddess. Whenever they depict the sun goddess, we know that she wears the head garb or the crest that's meant to denote some type of irradiating light to show knowledge, so on and so forth. Well, since Missy Elliott is coming from the concept or from the polar opposite, and also using him as a vessel to speak through in order to teach the masses. So now we see that in the same way when Peter Dinklage ended his verse, they did a direct advert for the quote-unquote Doritos fire chips. Now we see, after Morgan Freeman has ended his verse at the behest or under the inspiration of the quote-unquote goddess or princess of Saturn, played by Missy Elliott, the Ice Queen, now they're going to show the Mountain Dew ice, fire and ice. That has been the basic theme over the course of this video. is how they push the dichotomy of the cosmic fire versus the cosmic ice and how they're meant to come together. Notice that even though Peter Dinklage is representing the Doritos flame chips or the Doritos fire chips, and Morgan Freeman is representing the Mountain Dew ice drink or soda, you're supposed to have them together. You understand? You have the chips and the soda. So at the end of the day, they're bringing together both polarities. Okay, so now, brothers, in this epilogue for the portion of our investigation into the concept of the quote-unquote cult of Saturn, or the resolution of the polarities of the quote-unquote cosmic fire and the cosmic ice, we're going to delve into the commercial pertaining to Mr. Morgan Freeman and Peter Dinklage, who very clearly are meant to personify that credo of the opposing forces coming together as one. As we can see here, Mr. Peter Dinklage, I mean, no disrespect, he is a quote-unquote little person. He happens to be a Caucasian or so-called Caucasian, and he represents the aspect of the quote-unquote solar logos or the cosmic fire. Morgan Freeman is almost the exact opposite, and is on purpose. He's an extremely tall so-called black man who's meant to personify the quote-unquote cosmic ice or the Saturnian aspect, the Saturnian principle. And just the fact that Doritos and Mountain Dew chose to come together as two separate corporations to create a treatment for a commercial that so blatantly and transparently was trying to act as a mechanism or a portal or a vessel to teach these maxims shows you what? Both of these corporations are Saturnian. Just for them to utilize these tactics, they're both Saturnian. So let's immerse ourselves into some still photos, especially in regards to many of the people who chose to participate in this advertisement, and see if we can glean some information on their background and what may have been their motivation for how they were depicted in the commercial. So the first person from the commercial that we're going to focus on is Mr. Morgan Freeman, who's a legendary actor, extremely talented, but he is also a Luciferian / a Saturnian. And this is a photo here of him and his quote-unquote granddaughter. I say quote-unquote because it's not his granddaughter by blood. It's a young lady by the name of Adina Hines, who was ritualistically murdered back in 2015. And I'm going to go about proving that she was ritualistically murdered. It was not by happenstance that she was stabbed up by her quote-unquote boyfriend to appease certain ruling factions in Hollywood. The same ruling factions that show obeisance to the spiritual energies that galvanize Hollywood, of which Mr. Morgan Freeman is privy to. Am I saying that he's the one who set it up? No, I'm not. I'm not saying that overtly, but it's very clear to me that once you connect the dots, it's not too difficult to figure out how and why this transpired. So let's check it out and see what we come up with. Okay, so brothers, this was an article from the New York Post dated August 16th, 2015. Let's see what it says. Morgan Freeman's granddaughter fatally stabbed in exorcism. Isn't that interesting? Morgan Freeman's quote-unquote granddaughter, his step-granddaughter, was murdered by her quote-unquote boyfriend who claimed that he was performing an exorcism on Miss Adina Hines. An exorcism meaning what? That he was trying to ward off a demonic spirit that he felt like was inhabiting her body. Now let's be for real. Those of us who've had extensive experience with these modern day women, I'm sure that we will attest that most of them need exorcisms, but but it's not our responsibility to perform those exorcisms. But you know, just getting back to the point, let's see what the article states here. Morgan Freeman with Adina Hines at the Golden Globes in 2005. The granddaughter of acclaimed actor Morgan Freeman was stabbed to death on a Manhattan sidewalk early Sunday during what law enforcement sources and witnesses described as an exorcism at the hands of her ranting boyfriend. Isn't it strange how they worded that? It says here that law enforcement sources and witnesses described it as an exorcism. Now, wouldn't it be more relevant if the boyfriend was the one who claimed that he was the one performing the exorcism? Why would law enforcement and witnesses describe it as that? Unless this is a fake quote, or they interviewed someone who was in on what actually occurred, or who had knowledge or information on what was the motivating force behind what actually occurred. Let's delve into this a bit more. Get out, devils, I cast you out. Devils, in the name of Jesus Christ, I cast you out. The killer yelled as he plunged a hunting knife into 33-year-old Adina Hines' chest, according to George Hudako, who witnessed the 3 a.m. attack from his apartment window in Washington Heights. Brothers, I'm going to read this again. It says, get out, devils, I cast you out. Devils, in the name of Jesus Christ, I cast you out. The killer yelled as he plunged a hunting knife into 33-year-old Adina Hines' chest. That right there was the first clue. That was the first clue that she was targeted for a ritualistic killing or a ritualistic sacrifice. By whom? It must have been that she was targeted by someone who was within the craft and needed a blood sacrifice of someone who he was close to or who he loved. And as we've already seen from the last 2 Avengers films, this is a concept that is not foreign or alien to those who are in the craft known as Hollyweird. Remember that Thanos had to throw his daughter from between the twin pillars as a sacrifice in order to access the Soul Stone. In Avengers Endgame, you had Hawkeye and Black Widow fight with one another over who was going to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the other being able to acquire the quote-unquote Soul Stone. The reason why they put that in the film was because the directors, the screenwriters, the actors in Hollyweird are witches, they are Saturnians, and they're in the know that in order for them to maintain any high level of fame, eventually or initially, they are going to have to offer up someone who they love to quote-unquote Saturn or Kronos or Asar or Ptah, whatever you want to call that entity, Baal, Molech, so on and so forth. They are going to have to offer someone close to them up to that energy for the sake of appeasing that quote-unquote deity, according to the rules of the Kabbalistic tree of life. It says Hines, an actress who had appeared on Broadway and on red carpets at Freeman's side, was stabbed 16 times, officials said. Once again, brothers, pay attention to the fact that she was 33 years old. And according to the so-called witness, the alleged witness, the attack happened at approximately 3 a.m. Very similar to what we saw from Mr. Nipsey Hussle. He was killed at 33 years old. The attack occurred at 3:30 p.m., approximately 3:30 p.m., and he was shot 6 times. So we know what that comes out to. That comes out to 666, which is the number of the quote-unquote beast, who is Saturn, or Baal. Brothers, this is a photo of Miss Adina Hines with the killer, the quote-unquote assassin, who I believe was very obviously a Manchurian candidate, a sleeper assassin who was placed under the programming at some point. Maybe he was set up with her by Morgan Freeman or one of his associates. But as we read the story, it's going to be very clear exactly what he was, because as I've stated to you brothers numerous times, Manchurian candidates are normally ascertained by understanding certain circumstantial evidence, that being the presence in the past of being put under some form of psychiatric treatment or evaluation, being administered particularly hallucinogenic drugs like PCP, LSD, angel dust. Those are very important components of mind control. So let's just pay attention to what this story states about Mr. Lamar Davenport. It says here, Hines. Let me do a close-up on this photo here, this screenshot. Hines, whose grandmother Jeanette Adair Bradshaw was Freeman's first wife, was attacked on West 162nd Street near St. Nicholas Avenue, a few buildings from where she lived, cops and sources said. Her live-in boyfriend, Lamar Davenport, 30, was in the throes of a drug-induced psychosis when he came after her, police sources said. Jesus Christ is born, he shouted maniacally over her body. A friend who'd had dinner with Davenport and Hines just hours earlier described her as ecstatic, the Daily Beast reported. I've never seen Adina as happy as she was last night, said the friend Ray Rosario. By 3 a.m., Davenport was so crazed that he continued his attack even as Hines lay lifeless on the sidewalk, one police source said. That's because he was under mind control. He was told he was given a trigger to set off the command that was given to him, maybe months in advance or maybe even years in advance, that on that particular date, this is what he was going to do. Once the asset is primed and properly prepped, it's like a remote control car. You can have them do whatever you want them to do. They even showed you that in comedic form in that film starring Leslie Nielsen, Naked Gun. When they had that MK athlete Reggie Jackson all of a sudden ready to kill the Queen of England. They put it in joke form, but it's very true. It's very real. They also had Priscilla Presley, the former quote-unquote wife, i.e. MK handler, as well as being an MK asset herself. She was an MK handler for Elvis Presley. She also, near the end of the film, showed that she was under mind control. So now it says, when cops wrestled him off her, he was still making a stabbing motion with his arm, but he had nothing in his fist. The knife was jutting out of her chest, the police source said. So, wow. This person, the murderer, or the assassin, I should say, he was so deeply under mind control that he was still making the stabbing motion with his arm, with his hand, even though the knife was deeply embedded in this woman's chest. That's how detached he was. That's how much he had disassociated from reality. Davenport, an actor and rapper wannabe whose nickname is Lyric, abuses cocaine, pot, and booze, and has 2 young children, according to law enforcement sources. Hines was not their mother. Notice, brothers, it says here that this person, Lamar Davenport, aka Lyric, abuses cocaine, pot, and booze. Remember that it states that he abuses cocaine, pot, and booze. So now reading down, it states he has 6 prior arrests, including for marijuana and petty larceny, the sources added. Davenport was taken to New York Presbyterian Hospital for a psychological evaluation. No, he was taken to New York Presbyterian Hospital to be debriefed by the handler who was going to meet him there. That's why he was taken to New York Presbyterian Hospital. For the same reason that the quote-unquote assassin of Nipsey Hussle, what's this guy's name, Eric Holder, that's why he was picked up at a mental health facility. Because after the deed was done, that was part and parcel of the protocol of that mental suggestion. After the deed is done, you reconvene with your handler at this location. Or you're going to be taken to be debriefed back to this location, and this person is going to say this phrase to you, and then you're going to forget everything that happened. You're going to forget how you were programmed. You're going to forget everything that occurred that night. And you'll have to take the fall. Freeman, 78, issued a statement soon after the attack. The world will never know her artistry and talent and how much she had to offer, the Oscar winner said. Her star will continue to shine bright in our hearts, thoughts, and prayers. May she rest in peace. So Morgan Freeman states that he wants his step-granddaughter to rest in peace. But also, please remember that Morgan Freeman believes that he himself is God. So I'm not quite sure if the "may she rest in peace" is a request, or is it a command, a divine command given by him. So now it states Hines was Freeman's granddaughter because her mother had been adopted by the star. He was so close to Hines that in 2012, he had to squash reports that they were lovers. Hines was a graduate of NYU's graduate acting program and played Beniatha in A Raisin in the Sun on Broadway in 2012. She left the city to teach in her hometown of Memphis, Tennessee, but returned to New York in April to co-star in the indie film Landing Up. She was an amazing, incredible, loving human being, the film's director, Daniel Tenenbaum, told the Post. Well, she may have been all those things, but she also was the ritualistic sacrifice that was placed on the altar by Mr. Morgan Freeman, allegedly. Allegedly. Everything that I'm saying in this video is alleged. But once again, well, yes, she very well may have been a loving, incredible human being, but she also was the ritualistic sacrifice that was placed on the altar, in my view, by Mr. Morgan Freeman, allegedly. Just my view of it, just my perspective on it. So, brothers, I'm just going to try to provide some context pertaining to my view of what occurred to Miss Adina Hines on that night back in 2015. They state that her boyfriend, Mr. Tamar Davenport, at 33 years old, murdered her at 3 a.m. That is known as the quote-unquote witching hour. That is the time period where it's believed, according to the dictates of the Luciferian teachings or the witchcraft world, that there are portals where demons can come through during that time period, where magic is at its most potent. And that's the reason, at least in my view, why Mr. Lamar Davenport's programming demanded that he sacrifice Miss Adina Hines at that time. That was according to the dictates of Mr. Morgan Freeman, in my view, just my perspective on it. Let's see what it says here under witching hour. In folklore, the witching hour or devil's hour is a time of night associated with supernatural events. Creatures such as witches, demons, and ghosts are thought to appear and to be at their most powerful. Brothers, please keep in mind that, as I've already stated, when they asked the police and the quote-unquote alleged witnesses what occurred, they referred to it as an exorcism. Why would they refer to it as an exorcism? That's what he was supposed to refer to it as. Why would they refer to it as that? Unless what they're trying to communicate to their readers or the viewers of the news story, that what this actually was a form of sacrifice. It was a way in which they were going to convey to the masses that this is not just a regular quote-unquote murder. There's a spiritual significance behind how she was killed, why she was killed, what time she was killed, and by whom she was killed, and for whom she was killed. So let me read it again. In folklore, the witching hour or devil's hour is a time of night associated with supernatural events. Creatures such as witches, demons, and ghosts are thought to appear and to be at their most powerful. Black magic is thought to be most effective at this time. Brothers, you see that? Black magic is thought to be most effective at this time. In the Western Christian tradition, the hour between 3 and 4 a.m. was considered a period of peak supernatural activity due to the absence of prayers in the canonical hours during this period. Women caught outside without sufficient reason during this time were sometimes executed on suspicion of witchcraft. Brother, you see that? Women caught outside without sufficient reason during this time were sometimes executed on suspicion of witchcraft. What was it within the programming of her quote-unquote boyfriend, Lamar Davenport, that caused him to accuse her of being possessed by the devil, unless this was a ritual that was made to occur during the quote-unquote witching hour? Maybe she was a young initiate in the acting world, as we've already read. She was someone who was trying to make her way in the acting world. She was probably an apprentice of Morgan Freeman. They may have practiced certain sexual magical rituals to try to advance her career. But as they detail in many movies, whether it be Star Wars or other films that allude to the quote-unquote Luciferian concept of the master and the apprentice, the master may try to sacrifice the apprentice at any time. How many times in the Star Wars films did either Darth Vader or the Emperor try to bring on a new apprentice with the promise that we'll kill the quote-unquote master who's already there, or we'll kill the apprentice that I already have? Right? It's nothing to them, because everything is about the courting of spiritual power, of quote-unquote supernatural power. So I'm going to read it one more time. Women caught outside without sufficient reason during this time were sometimes executed on suspicion of witchcraft. The phrase witching hour was first recorded in 1835. So that is what I believe happened with Miss Adina Hines. And it's consistent with the Saturnian concept of the quote-unquote ritualistic blood sacrifice. Remember that Saturn is the quote-unquote god of death. He represents the black sun, or the dark aspect of the sun. Remember, the solar logos is the light aspect. Saturn is the dark aspect. They're brought together. Okay, so now, brothers, this is an update on the case pertaining to Miss Adina Hines, or her murder, her ritualistic murder, in my view, at the hands of her quote-unquote boyfriend, i.e. the plant, the Manchurian candidate who was sent in to perform the ritualistic murder, most likely for Mr. Morgan Freeman, who's clearly a very high-ranking witch / warlock in the craft, the witch coven known as Hollywood. So let's see exactly how this transpired. It says here, boyfriend found guilty in stabbing of Morgan Freeman's granddaughter. This was on May 7th of 2018. So let's remember, the murder occurred in August of 2015. His sentencing occurred on May 7th of 2018. So they waited 3 years in order to sentence him. Let's find out why. Once again, it says, boyfriend found guilty in stabbing of Morgan Freeman's granddaughter. A Manhattan man has been found guilty of stabbing to death Morgan Freeman's step-granddaughter and alleged lover. Judge Ellen Bybin on Wednesday convicted Lamar Davenport on lesser manslaughter charges for knifing his girlfriend Adina Hines 25 times on a Washington Heights sidewalk in full view of pedestrians and neighbors in August 2015. In the original report, I believe it said that she was stabbed 16 times. Now they're saying 25 times. We'll leave that alone. But the guilty verdict was still a victory of sorts for Davenport's lawyers, who argued that their client, who stood trial on murder charges, attacked Hines, the granddaughter of Freeman's first wife, in a PCP-fueled haze and was not aware of what he was doing. Now remember, brothers, when we read the list of drugs that he normally used or was addicted to, it said alcohol, it said weed, it said cocaine. It never mentioned anything about PCP or any other hallucinogenic drugs. But now they're saying that he was on PCP the night that he committed the quote-unquote murder. Always remember that LSD, mescaline, PCP are very important components to mind control because it aids, especially the programmer, it aids the programmer in causing the asset to disassociate, to compartmentalize certain programming. Davenport, 33, appeared stoic as the verdict came down. So he killed her when she was 33. He was 30 years old. They waited 3 years so that he could receive his sentence at 33 years old himself. During the 3-week trial, Bybin heard testimony from eyewitnesses who watched in horror as Davenport plunged the knife over and over into the 33-year-old woman's chest. Hines' estranged biological mother, Dina Adair, even took the stand to tearfully recount how the two were reconnecting in the days before her daughter was killed. Allegedly, you guys were reconnecting. Allegedly. Adair was in court Monday to hear the verdict and showed no reaction as Bybin read her decision aloud. Hines, an actress with no blood relation to the star of The Shawshank Redemption, was raised by Freeman's second wife, Myrna Coley Lee. Rumors about her and the 80-year-old actor's romantic involvement swirled for years, though both staunchly denied being in a sexual relationship. It wasn't until Davenport's trial when the long-suspected affair was confirmed. So, brothers, the rumor about Morgan Freeman having a sexual relationship with his step-granddaughter was confirmed during the trial. Interestingly enough, that never made the mainstream news. Didn't make the mainstream news at all. That it was finally confirmed that Morgan Freeman indeed did have a sexual affair with his step-granddaughter. And as I've stated, I don't think that it was just frivolous or casual sex either. I think that there was a component of sex magic. I think that he was trying to induct her or indoctrinate her, introduce her to the early preliminary stages of becoming a star in Hollywood, or at least a presence in Hollywood. And in order to do that, you have to embrace your quote-unquote sexual freedom. You must become a pansexual. Pansexuality, once again, is not just men and women. It also entails animals, it entails children, it entails incest, so on and so forth. Now, in this case, they were not incestuous by blood, but I mean, that's your step-granddaughter, so you've seen her from a small child. Just the fact that you would engage in any type of sexual encounter with her when you saw her from a baby or an infant or a toddler per se, it's pretty much the same thing. And when I say it's pretty much the same thing, I'm saying it's pretty much the same thing as incest, as actual incest. Once again, it wasn't until Davenport's trial when the long-suspected affair was confirmed, when lawyers for both the defense and prosecution stipulated that Hines had disclosed to Lamar Davenport and others that her grandfather engaged in a sexually inappropriate relationship with her. So what does that mean, brothers? That most likely means that he was doing things with her and to her from when she was 12, 13 years old. I'm just going by what it states here when it says sexually inappropriate. Sexually inappropriate things, meaning illegal things. Most likely when she was younger than the legal age. That's how I'm reading into it. It states here, it wasn't clear when the relationship took place or when it started. The defense initially argued their client should be found not guilty by reason of insanity, which of course is the only defense that they can make, because most likely, or more likely than not, he was not able to provide a cogent reason for why he did what he did, because that memory had been wiped away by his handler, most likely. Once again, it says the defense initially argued their client should be found not guilty by reason of insanity, but switched gears when the judge ruled he no longer met the guidelines for that defense. They then requested that Bybin find Davenport guilty of a lesser manslaughter charge. Prosecutors argued Davenport fully intended to kill Hines, given that he attacked no one else on the street and the couple had smoked PCP together before without incident. Can they prove that they smoked PCP together before? I wonder what's their proof for that statement. So, brothers, to make a long story short, it's very obvious to me what this was. Unfortunately for Miss Adina Hines, maybe she did not have it properly explained to her what the acting world, what the entertainment industry was all about. Once you enter into that witch coven, everyone is fair game. You can be sacrificed. Anyone else can be sacrificed. That's how they work. And you're held in higher esteem based on your willingness to sacrifice those closest to you. That's why Jay-Z stated on that song, Run This Town, he said, he was talking about the people sitting at the next table. He said they should throw their hand in because they ain't got no spades. Meaning what? They're scared to perform the ritualistic sacrifice that it would take to accrue any type of fame or acclaim in Hollywood. Jay-Z basically was letting it be known, why bother trying to be a singer or an actor or someone who's famous if you're going to be scared to do what needs to be done? That being, have the sacrifice performed. So, brothers, as we all know, the television show Game of Thrones is extremely popular. And there's very little reason to wonder why. It's because it is a Saturnian program. It's basically a very thinly veiled analogy or metaphor for Norse mythology. That's why they push slogans like fire and ice, which itself is correlated with the concept of Ragnarok, that great day of judgment in which Hel and Loki will seek revenge for being imprisoned, and they will take down the gods of Aesir, so on and so forth. The point being is this: in all reality, Ragnarok is really meant to denote the concept of the witches who adhere to the concepts of Odin or Wotan and Teutonic magic, finally revealing themselves to the masses and forcing the masses to submit to the ideologies of the craft. That's actually what Ragnarok is an allusion to. And basically, when you study the mythologies of the nations, they tell a very similar story to what is depicted in the scriptures. They just do it in a very convoluted way, because the truth of what is going to befall mankind was not given to the nations. It was only meant to be conveyed in the scriptures. But just getting back to the point, as we can see here, this character played by Peter Dinklage of Tyrion Lannister, I believe his name is, they depict him being half blue. And of course, his other half is not going to be red per se, but it is red. So it's part blue, part red, because it is cosmic fire versus cosmic ice. That's what their show is about. It's about the battle of the Norse gods. They're all at war for the quote-unquote throne, the Iron Throne per se. Okay, so now, brothers, we're going to move on to Mr. Busta Rhymes and Miss Missy Elliott. In the commercial for the quote-unquote fire and ice concept from Doritos and Mountain Dew, and of course the main protagonists were played by Peter Dinklage as well as Morgan Freeman, they had spirit guides. They had demons that assisted them in being able to spew out their raps and also come up with the raps in their head so that they could deliver them properly. That was their role in the commercial. Many people might not have picked up on it. Both Morgan Freeman and Peter Dinklage were witches. They utilized katoptromancy to conjure certain spirit guides who could assist them in being more proficient in their art. For the sake of the commercial, that being the quote-unquote rap battle. Busta Rhymes, as we can see here, is a witch. He's a wizard. He's throwing up the X symbol with his fingers and just displaying the left eye, showing you that he's a venerator of the quote-unquote divine feminine. And most likely behind closed doors, he's a pansexual as well. I shouldn't say most likely, he is a pansexual. Most likely behind closed doors, he indulges thoroughly in quote-unquote ritualistic homosexual orgies. Allegedly. For those of you brothers who've kept up with many of the comings and goings that occur in the hip-hop world, every once in a while you'll hear a story about a dude who claims that Busta Rhymes hit on him, per se. Of course, I've always stated that in the entertainment industry, all they're about is ritualistic orgies and quote-unquote sex magic. So in order for you to get far, to get into the movies, to get your album pushed and promoted, to be able to get features on your album, you have to be down with the craft. And as Busta Rhymes is showing you here, he's down with the craft. The X symbolizes the 0 point energy. It symbolizes illumination. It symbolizes transformation. The X was the symbol of Ptah Min, or Min, aka Chem. For those of you brothers who read the scriptures, Chem is Ham, and he was known in ancient Kemet as Min, M-I-N, always depicted with the erect phallus. So brothers, here on the cover of the quote-unquote Source magazine, what they call the quote-unquote the green issue, we see Busta Rhymes playing the role of the quote-unquote green man, also known as Asar, also known as Tammuz or Adonis, the quote-unquote god of vegetation, Demuzid. Pay very close attention to his hand. Look at the sign that he's making with his left hand. You see that? They sneak this into their album covers, onto magazine covers, to always symbol to other members of the craft that they are courting the energies of the horned god. That's all Lucifer is. When you hear people talk about Lucifer, that's the triumvirate of the horned god, the mother goddess, and the divine child, their divine son, quote unquote. Busta Rhymes is an adherent to that ideology. Okay, so now brothers, if the previous photo was not blatant enough for you, Busta's going to throw up this hand sign again. Once again, it always amazes me. No one ever asks these quote unquote artists what that hand sign is supposed to convey. What is that supposed to mean to you? That you're throwing up that horned hand sign. We all remember it from the 80s, the early 90s. The hard rockers, they would throw up that hand sign because they would very blatantly tell you that they worship Satan and that they would do certain rituals and things of that nature to try to allot a certain amount of positive energy, or at least how they viewed it, positive energy for themselves, to maintain good fortune as a heavy metal artist, quote unquote, or just a witch. So why are these hip hop dudes doing that unless they're also witches? Which is what they've always been. You know, a lot of people like to come down very hard on the modern day hip hop artists. Oh, you know, all these guys, they just mumble rap. They're all bums. They all worship Satan. Let me tell you something. Hip hop has been a tool for Luciferianism and even Satanism for decades. Run DMC, all those guys, Luciferians. Why do you think Run DMC did that video, Walk This Way? And they showed the wall breaking down between themselves and, what's the name of that group? The name of these guys? Steven Tyler's group. I think Aerosmith. And in that video, they also show Run DMC on the checkerboard floor. So for decades, hip-hop has been awash in Luciferianism. That's how they've gotten to the top, bottom line. And that's why, by the way, that's why Reverend Run is still around today. Don't let that fake collar and all that bullshit fool you, talking about he's a reverend. Yes, he's a reverend for Lucifer, allegedly. I'm just giving you my take on it, my perspective, but I'm just telling you the truth. He's a reverend for Lucifer, as they all were. That's why they sacrificed, what's my man's name? The DJ, Jam Master Jay. That's why the police always claim to not know who committed the murder. I mean, give me a break. High-profile cases like that go unsolved, that's how you know that it was a Luciferian hit. Because at the upper levels of these police departments, these intelligence agencies, they're all governed according to the dictates of the occultic world. All of them. So that's why you see certain quote-unquote crimes never get solved. But once again, look at Busta Rhymes throwing up the hand sign of the horned god. He's throwing up with the left hand to let you know he's all the way in. And we have here 1-800-TIP Harris, the government informant himself, allegedly giving a salute. And look at his hand. He's making sure that he makes the V hand sign or the shin hand sign with his right hand when he gives his fake salute. After they took this photo, Busta Rhymes probably whispered into his ear, "My hotel room or yours." Here's another photo with Mr. Busta Rhymes letting you know his preference for the quote-unquote Queen of Heaven, aka Hathor or Aset. He worships the divine feminine. He venerates the divine feminine. And he wants the energy of the divine feminine to work through him. In other words, he's telling you what? He likes to go both ways. Okay? Allegedly. Here goes Busta Rhymes with Pharrell Williams, the producer of the group, the quote-unquote Neptunes. And as we can see, once again, they're throwing up the quote-unquote reptilian hand sign or the Shin hand sign, the sign for Vulcan, the sun god, who always stipulates a ritualistic sacrifice. Now, here's a relatively recent photo of Busta Rhymes. As a matter of fact, this has to do with the topic of the video, that being him being a spirit guide for the for the Doritos and the Mountain Dew commercial. And I guess the name Busta Rhymes, it used to mean that he was a great rapper, that he could bust a rhyme. Now the name Busta clearly means that he's going to bust out of his coat because he's so damn fat. But let's look at his hand sign. Once again, he's forming the quote-unquote pyramid to show you that he's trying to court the energies of Asar, as well as the fact that he's wearing all black. They know that Asar and Baal and Saturn are all talking about the same entity, the quote-unquote great demiurge, Ptah. And of course, he's standing next to this marble brain dude, Le'Veon Bell. Damn shame. Here's Busta Rhymes utilizing a highly favored and preferred tactic of the Hollywood Luciferians, especially the so-called black Hollywood Luciferians. They like to hold their baseball cap with just their index finger and their thumb, or their glasses with just their index finger and their thumb, and make the quote-unquote illuminated hand sign, the so-called 666 sign, with both their hands. And he's doing that here with his bag of potato chips. Once again, Le'Veon Bell, with his simple-minded self, he's just standing there, smiling, happy to be next to Busta Rhymes. Now we're going to move on to Miss Missy Elliott, the spirit guide for Morgan Freeman, who represents the Saturnian principle. Missy Elliott is very transparent about the fact that she was abused and molested as a child. She was physically abused by her father, who was a military veteran, as well as allegedly being molested by her cousin. I'm not quite a believer that she was only molested by her cousin. It would not surprise me if she was molested by multiple people, because that is normally par for the course for these Hollywood celebrities. That's how they get there in the first place. Molestation opens up many portals for demons to enter into these children who become quote-unquote celebrities. But as we can see here, just to get back to the point, Missy Elliott utilizing the same tactics that we see over and over again, the left eye for the mother goddess Hathor, as well as having her tongue out of her mouth for Kali, the mother goddess. All of these females in the entertainment industry are proverbial manifestations for the mother goddess energy. Here is Missy Elliott showing her allegiance to the quote-unquote divine child, the son of the mother goddess. This time she's just showing her right eye, the eye of Heru. And this is another confirmation that she is a venerator of the divine child as well. We see that she's wearing the quote-unquote heart necklace. The heart is another symbol for the quote-unquote sun. Heru is known as the quote-unquote sun god or the skywalker. Whenever you see that heart, the heart is for Bel. Bel is also known as Ra. Ra, as those of us who have researched into the Kemetic mystery school system, was quote-unquote reincarnated or brought back in another manifestation as Heru. So the heart was viewed as being the sun of the body by the people of Kemet. So they would always depict Heru as a heart, or sometimes as sitting on the lotus flower, or sometimes as the sun, sometimes as a lion, so on and so forth. So brothers, this is another example of Missy Elliott showing her allegiance to the quote-unquote divine child, the son of the mother goddess Heru, or Horus, or Harpocrates. As I've just stated in the previous photo, Heru could be depicted or personified through numerous symbols, one of them being the lion. Being the son of Ptah and Bastet, he was known as the lion-headed god, Ma'ahes, spelled M as in Michael, A-A-H-E-S. As we can see here on Missy Elliott's sweater, she's showing the divine lion, Heru. That's where you get the animated film The Lion King from. It's basically an animated retelling of the story of Heru, after his father, Mufasa, who represents Asar, was killed by Scar, who represents Set. Now Simba must come of age. Simba is Heru. That's why the sun is a constant motif in the film The Lion King, because Heru is what? He's the sun god. But just getting back to this photo of Missy Elliott, we see her sitting here with the quote-unquote divine lion on her chest, on her sweater. But pay very close attention to her hands. Look at the hand sign that she's making with both of her hands. You see that, brothers? She's doing the quote-unquote 666 sign with both of her hands. It's so funny. You know, as a teenager or as a child, you grow up listening to their music and you say to yourself, these people are talented, they make enjoyable music. And then you come of age and you look back and you see things as an adult, or at least someone who's astute, and you understand things on a far deeper level. And you also start to grasp the lengths by which the powers of the left-hand side will go to conceal exactly what they're trying to teach and who they're trying to use to teach the masses. These people are teachers. That's why Rihanna stated in the video that I did on Rihanna being a priestess of Saturn. She stated that we're the teachers of this, and we got just what you need. She's talking about the tree of knowledge. They have to plant the seed. That's their job through their music, is to plant the seed of Luciferianism into the minds of the listener. Now here's Missy Elliott throwing up the quote-unquote X for Asar, or for count. Now here we see Missy Elliott throwing up the quote-unquote X for Asar, or for Ptah Men. And people think that X across the chest is something new from Wakanda. That shit is not anything new. They just use that film to program people into throwing up that sign. That's why, once again, they're the teachers of this. They use cinema and commercials and TV shows to get people to embrace Luciferianism unbeknownst to them. Okay? This is Missy Elliott throwing up that same arm gesture. This photo is probably from 20 years ago. Now, brothers, they're going to be very blatant in this magazine cover right here. This is Missy Elliott with her face in between the quote-unquote divine downward triangle for the mother goddess and the quote-unquote holy vagina. You see Missy Elliott's face here. She's showing you what? That she's a lesbian. Now let's look at the subtitle here. It says the divine Miss E. You see that? And the divine is in blue and red for the concept of Saturnianism, the coming together of opposites. Miss E is in the yellow to show that she is the proverbial sun. She is the enlightener. She's the personification of the mother goddess. That's why she's called the divine Miss E. And they have her face in between the downward triangle, which is the divine aspect of the mother goddess, that being her quote-unquote vagina. Here's Missy Elliott showing just her left eye once again to show what? She's a venerator of Isis or Aset, Hathor, whatever you want to call that entity. Brothers, I hope that I'm making this clear. They cannot accrue any type of fame unless they embrace the craft, the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system. Now in this photo, we see Missy Elliott in her quote-unquote sex altar, or her hypersexualized altar with the animal print. Also opening her, whatever that outer garment is. She's making sure that her left hand, as I always tell you, brothers, they do this on purpose. They will just hold up their garment with their index finger and their thumb finger pinching together, so that their middle finger, the ring finger, and the pinky finger will be extended in the symbol for quote-unquote 666, or the yoni per se, which is a sex magical hand gesture. And as a lot of cats say on the internet, they call it the quote-unquote 666 hand sign. The number 666 is for Saturn. Okay? That's what it's for. Missy Elliott deeply embedded in a lot of this ritualistic shit. Now here's another photo of Missy Elliott throwing up the quote-unquote inverted triangle to show once again that she is a venerator of the divine feminine and also a quote-unquote lesbian, or at least that is her preference. Being in the craft, she's a pansexual, but the preference for her is clearly lesbianism. Now here's Missy Elliott with one of her apprentices in the industry, Miss Fantasia Barrino, who I believe was a winner on the television show American Idol, probably about 12, 13 years ago. Fantasia has struggled in the industry, but the only way for you to keep your head above water is to become a Saturnian. And as we can see here, both of them are accentuating Saturnian principles. Missy Elliott with the black and white on, Fantasia with the all black outfit with the red lipstick. Let's look at Fantasia's hand sign. You see that, brothers? Once again, Fantasia Barrino showing you that she has bowed down to the quote-unquote horn god Pan. That is the only way to survive in the industry. You have to submit to the programming. You have to submit to the indoctrination of the Babylonian Kemetic mystery school system and allow yourself to become a witch and a worker in the quote-unquote great work, to get the masses to accept the quote-unquote Kabbalistic tree of life and also the dark path of the tree of life, what they call the Lipothic tree of life. You have the Kabbalistic tree of life, or the Sephiroth, and you have the Lipothic tree of life. They adhere to both because once they get to the highest levels, they are forced to grasp that there is no difference between quote-unquote dark magic and quote-unquote light magic or white magic. And that truly is what Saturnianism or the Saturnian philosophy is about. That whether it's the dark path or the light path, whether it's the sun or Saturn, it's all the same thing. You come together and you become a Superman or a Superwoman. You become a god within yourself. But anyway, brothers, that's going to end this video. So peace.